Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Company of Heroes live stream where we're going to be showcasing our next Company of Heroes 3 update, aka Emerald Bear or 1.2.0 if you like numbers. I am joined by a couple of fantastic folks from the design team, some familiar faces, some folks that we hired right out of the community. One of these folks is apparently a top player. I'll let you debate which one it is.
Well,
Miguel, Marco, how you gents doing? Marco, do you want to introduce us? If folks don't know who you are, what do you do on Company of Heroes?
sure. Hi everyone, I'm Marco. You might know me as Marcus239 from the Kotu.org or Game Replays communities.
Mhm.
And I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. And Miguel, what about you? Give us a quick intro.
People might know me as a DevM from the community. I played in a few tournaments before
A few.
And won them.
and won a few of them. But yeah, it's great to be here to talk about another patch.
Amazing. And I know Gabby just pinned it in the chat, but Emerald Bear is going to be releasing on July 25th. So that's coming up very soon. We're very excited for that. So we've got a lot to cover today. But as always, if you want to stay up to date on all the Company of Heroes news, you're going to want to follow us on your social channel of choice at Company of Heroes on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find our forums at community.companyofheroes.com, or for everything else, go to companyofheroes.com. And if you want to chat with me and all the other folks on the Discord, that's discord.gg/Company of Heroes, or follow us when we're doing these live, twitch.tv/Relic Entertainment. So, folks, what are we covering today? Like I said, it's going to be a high-level overview of all the changes coming in our Emerald Bear update. Again, coming out July 25th. We'll be covering everything from balance changes to pathfinding improvements, reworked off-map abilities, and so much more. What we won't be doing is covering every single line in the patch notes, as they're very, very long right now. I was looking at it the other day; it's like 30 pages or more or something. It's getting a little silly with all the new improvements that are coming to the game. So we'll be releasing the full patch notes just before Emerald Bear launches, so keep an eye out for that. Also, if you missed our maps overview from a couple weeks ago with one Monolithic Bacon, be sure to go back and check that out so you can see the new maps that are going to be coming to all of our game modes. How you both feeling? Before we kind of get into all the big questions, I'm going to throw you a curveball. How are you sort of feeling overall about the update 1.20 or Emerald Bear in general? Because I know you've both been doing a ton of work. Miguel, let's start with you. How are you feeling about sort of all the work that's kind of gone into this up to this point?
I'm feeling very positive about the patch. I think pathfinding has been a very discussed topic ever since the game launched, and I think everyone knows that pathfinding is a core part of any game. So I think the changes just make the game just much more playable. And also I'm feeling really good about all the work we've been doing with flight and off-map abilities. The standardization and behind the scenes work is really important as well. I just think that even with all the bug fixes that are coming in, the game will be just that much more solid.
Yeah, it's good to hear. What about you, Marco? How are you feeling about all the work that's gone into this so far?
Yeah, like Miguel, I share the same excitement for uh, our improvements on both pathfinding, on both vehicles and team weapons, and the work that we have been doing on the off map. But I'm also excited about some of the metagame features we have been working on that we will be talking about today, as they are part of the experience, and they are also some of the reasons why for example, played previous Go games in a more competitive way. So I'm pretty happy that we can finally unveil that part.
Awesome. That's good to hear. So let's maybe just jump right into things. I've got my fancy presentation here. First topic of discussion for today is going to be pathfinding. Miguel, let's start with that because I know that's kind of your big area of work. And I know there are still more improvements that are going to be coming in later updates. And we didn't quite get absolutely everything into Emerald Bear that we wanted. But I'm curious if you can maybe talk about, like, from a high level design perspective, what did you want to accomplish with these changes that are coming to pathfinding?
So the problem with pathfinding before was that maybe sometimes it was a little bit too smart for its own good. Pathfinding needs to be a good balance between being smart and being predictable, and often the player wouldn't really know where the vehicle would move through, or how things would react to their click. Um, so a lot of work was kind of done in making it a lot more predictable, and also just there were like a lot of moments in the game that were, as we like to call them, monitor punching moments with pathfinding.
Yeah.
So we've ironed most of them out, but I want to also explain that pathfinding is still a work that's not finished. We've targeted for this patch basically the worst part of it, which was vehicles, but there will be more changes coming.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. So let's maybe get into some of the more granular changes that are coming. I've got some before and after examples that I'll throw on screen here. We've been sharing some of these sneak peeks on social, so some of them might be familiar, some of them might be new. So I'll throw these up, and Miguel, maybe you can kind of talk us through some of the things that are going to be coming here, if I can find them. There we go. So yeah, so what are some of the more, I guess, smaller or more minute, changes that we've made here for pathfinding?
Yeah. So this one is a pretty handy one. Basically, we've now have the vehicles stop before they meet an impasse, which basically means that they'll be ready for the next movement order because they are not close to the building. Here it's actually a really important one, which is our vehicles now prefer to use the front
Front facing.
facing before they start their movement, which basically means that there's less times where the vehicle will reverse into battle. And of course, this one we showed before. This is about how vehicles used to want to clump up in the same place, and now they should basically move more as a formation instead.
Okay, yeah, that's good. It's good to see.
Yes.
So it's a little bit more like where they start and where they finish will
Yes,
look a little bit
exactly.
similar,
Like
right?
there wasn't any changes to their movement to the location. It's more like where they finish in the location.
Was this tied to where the user clicked? Like if it was close to cover or
Yes, yes. There was a problem that we found there specifically with unit movement. This is actually something also important, which is infantry often would get stuck running up against moving vehicles or team weapons.
What was this on retreat only, or was this just in general?
In general,
Right.
any infantry that was moving against vehicles or team weapons would basically keep going up against it, and now they should nicely avoid the team weapon or vehicle.
Oh, right, and phase through. I think some
Yes.
people in the chat were asking about this.
Yeah. So we've reintroduced a fair bit of phasing. Basically, phasing allows the less frustrating moments to the player. I think it's something that is really hard to describe without playing the game, but a little bit of phasing should be alright to eliminate the frustrating points. Because the problem with vehicles in general is that they are high value units. So anytime that a vehicle gets stuck, it's a chance for losing basically
you
the
to
game
lose
on the
the vehicle.
spot almost.
Yeah.
This one is a very subtle one. I think it will be hard to really properly communicate what's happening here, but basically there is now a wait between when the vehicle wants to go around something or when the vehicle wants to go up to something. And this is very useful for when you're chasing enemy vehicles and you want to keep your gun straight and not path around and keep your target basically in sight.
So can you explain road preference? Because I was a little bit
Yes.
unclear when you first brought this up to me in a meeting. I was like, I don't understand what you're talking
So
about.
road preference is one of those that maybe the pathfinding was too smart for its own good. We basically try to use roads to get to somewhere faster, whereas of now we turn that off, and the roads will still give the movement bonus, but now the player will have to do the click themselves. And this is for me one of the huge ones because it has a lot of implications to gameplay. Uh, the way that vehicles do their curves and turns should be a lot smoother. And the more heavily impact on gameplay that this has is that vehicles that are very mobile or when you're flanking an enemy vehicle should now be a lot more easier, which I think what we'll end up seeing is that vehicles with a lot of mobility, such as the Chaffee, will be a lot stronger in the upcoming patch.
Right, just because they have more,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, more maneuverability, and yeah, okay. So I have a couple of questions here from the chat that maybe I'll throw at you, Miguel. Is it only allied vehicles for the blocking, or can you still block enemy infantry?
Um,
Like for that preference for them to go around units.
so it should be with the enemies. So with the allies, there is still a preference. There's an avoidance, as we call it, to avoid allied vehicles. So they won't phase through unless they absolutely need to. Um, but they should still want to go around. But with enemy vehicles in specific, they do that behavior of basically going as further as they can before coming to a stop near the enemy vehicle,
Okay.
which is a good opportunity to also say that stopped enemy vehicles also block pathfinding.
Okay.
So it's not like you can phase through every instance.
Yeah, I had a couple questions about the road preference as well. Um, will that ever switch back and forth, or is or we're kind of turning it off right now so that they're taking more of a direct route? Will we play with that change in the future?
It's hard to say what and will not change with pathfinding. It's possible that it will change. For now, we went with the safer approach of turning it off because it's something that added a lot of unpredictability to how the vehicles would respond.
Yeah.
But I can see a scenario maybe in the future where we revisit it and add some of it for longer routes.
One of our modders was also asking if the road preference is linked to a texture in essence. I don't know if that's a question for you, or is it
I
a
don't
separate
believe
entity?
it is.
Okay.
We still retain the buffs on like when vehicles are on roads. They're still going to be moving faster. It's just that now uh, it needs a player intention, so specific orders to use roads rather
Yes.
than pathfinding automatically trying to use it. As we noticed that, and players notice it as well, that sometimes that the implication of that was that vehicles were taking unexpected paths, the paths that were considered more optimal, and that caused the vehicles to like take paths that were more dangerous for them.
I'll also mention that pathfinding, especially for the Company of Heroes franchise, is a very tricky topic. Um,
Yeah.
Mostly because in the Company of Heroes game, it does matter where the vehicle is facing. It does matter if the vehicle's on the move or not. So it's always hard to balance what the pathfinding should be doing because there might be situations where a player expects something to happen, but because in another situation it was bad enough that something else was happening, it affects that other situation. So sometimes you might expect that it's better for a vehicle to pivot on the spot, but maybe in some other instance you would have wanted the vehicle to keep moving to get out of range or of something. So it's always tricky to balance, specifically in this franchise, what the vehicles should be doing. But I think we've hit a good middle ground between predictability and the pathfinding being smart enough.
So Marco, when we're looking at these changes, I know we're kind of looking at some very specific examples, but I remember you were telling me that we kind of have to kind of look at them as a whole.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, of course. So I'm sure that everyone watching this video will formulate their own opinion about how vehicles are moving in each of these specific videos. But my suggestion is really for you guys to try them in the game once the patch rolls out, because all these changes they really add up together, and the ultimate goal is that you should perceive pathfinding as a whole improved compared to the to 116. So yeah, like take these specific videos as like with a little grain of salt, because they are showcasing specific scenarios. but the overall experience should feel generally much better.
Now, Miguel, I also know phasing is a bit of a spicy decision,
Oh yeah.
as it kind of,
Yeah.
there's that fine line between realism and
Yeah.
gameplay. So I'm kind of curious if you could maybe expand on that a bit.
Yeah. So we basically use still an avoidance system in vehicles, which basically means that vehicles will still try to avoid allied and enemy vehicles when possible. But what phasing should be really hitting are the moments where your vehicle is stuck in, for example, traffic jams in a bridge or something
Yeah.
similar, which would cause basically big frustration moments. But it still has a downside to it. That is, the vehicle does lose a lot of its speed while phasing, so it's not like it can phase at full speed.
Right.
But obviously, it's always going to be a contentious topic. But it's one of those things where I also feel like players should get their hands on it before basically coming to a conclusion on it, because it's really easy to right now say that, for example, phasing will bring bad things, but I feel like it's a net positive on the overall feel of the game and overall frustrating moments of the player when playing the game.
Okay, I'm going to hold you to that. I'm curious if there were any other sort of challenges to improving pathfinding, and sort of some of the things that you had to work on while you were doing this, because I know you were saying earlier it's a little bit tricky, especially in this franchise.
Yes, it's very very difficult actually, because even if we, for example, phasing, let's take phasing for this scenario, phasing on itself, if it isn't there, there's lots of scenarios where tanks will permanently be stuck on each other, for example, because they'll be trying to avoiding each other and they are on the move at the same time, and it's really difficult sometimes to really get something that, from a player perspective, is smooth. But there's obviously a lot of other components to pathfinding. So, for example, when to take a pivot or when to do a turn,
Right.
because again, it does matter a lot in our game. When how the vehicle finishes their movement. If they finish their movement facing 45 degrees to the left or facing exactly to the front of where the player clicked, it does matter a lot. And we do need to make at some points the decision of what behavior the vehicle will have when doing those, and that might in some situations, it's always a balance between what will be the situations that are the worst and that we can fix, and maybe it makes something less optimal in some other very niche scenario.
Yeah.
But that's something that we need to take.
Okay.
Another good example of that is, for example, formation movement. If you're selecting two vehicles and you click and they are, let's say, 20 meters away from each other, and you click on the center of them, maybe one vehicle thinks that it's better to reverse into it, and the other thinks it's better to move forward into it. But if there's like an enemy in between, then maybe you wouldn't want the vehicle to reverse into the point that you clicked. So it's very difficult to get that predictability and what the player expects out of the pathfinding, especially in our game. When in other RTS games, it doesn't really matter if the unit just starts moving backwards instantly, even from a realism standpoint. But yeah, hopefully this patch brings a lot of good things for pathfinding. It's still an iterative approach, so we'll still be taking feedback on pathfinding. So it's not that anything is final.
Right.
Yeah.
And like we were saying earlier, I know there's still more work being done here
Yes,
that's going to come
exactly.
in later.
Yeah. We have a lot of like great engineers helping
Yeah.
us.
Yes.
It's really like a team effort that we couldn't do without the help of all these people.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of related to the pathfinding stuff. Let me get my fancy presentation back up here. We want to talk about some of the updates that we're doing to vehicles. Miguel, I know we've done a full pass on vehicle speeds, rotation, acceleration, deceleration. Could you maybe elaborate on that a little bit? Like what are we kind of hoping to accomplish with that work there?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's a little bit of creating a baseline for our vehicles. We want to have better distinctions between what a light vehicle is in terms of acceleration and movement speed versus, let's say, a tank like a Sherman, right? So a lot of it was about creating clear distinctions between vehicle classes. And there's also a component that, because of the pathfinding changes and because of weapon traverse changes that we'll get to after, um, it has a lot of implications on how the game plays. So
Right.
it just made sense to ally acceleration, pivot speeds, and everything else to pathfinding changes.
And I think the Marco, one of the things that we wanted to do here was sort of have a clear distinction between vehicle classes. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, we wanted to have a clear distinction between light, medium, and heavy vehicles. So there shouldn't be cases of like medium vehicles being faster than light ones. And these will really be emphasized by the improvements to the vehicle pathfinding. For example, as Miguel was suggesting earlier, we are bringing back weapon traverse, and so
Spoilers.
spoilers. So those casemate vehicles will now be have a dedicated like kind of like movement set, so they will be like slower, but their gun can traverse. So I think it's important to notice, and this is especially to those that have played Co 1, that vehicles moving in front facing or sorry, moving forward or in reverse, they have different speed values. While instead in Co 3, our initial approach is to keep them the same, which makes it in a way harder for pathfinding to judge if it's better to move using front facing or moving in reverse.
Okay.
And that's why we also brought back the like we made front facing more relevant.
Okay. No, it's good to know. Um, so let's maybe talk next about weapon traverse.
Yes.
Marco, what's changed there? Can you kind of maybe give us a high level overview of what's going on with weapon
Yes.
traverse?
So we have finally enabled weapon traverse. It was actually something that was already available in our attribute editor. So it was possible to turn it on and off. The problem is that, and why we didn't turn it on before, is that there were various visual and behavior bugs that were
Okay.
preventing us to really making those vehicles act as we wanted. So we kept it disabled until we could finally fix those and then enable them. And we
Okay.
also wanted to couple those changes with the pathfinding improvements, as when you enable traversing, and usually it's between 10 and 15 degrees left and right. We do want to make sure that those vehicles don't feel too powerful, and also not too weak, because a reality that players will find out is that using vehicles is going to be a much smoother experience. So,
So,
so
so, so
yeah.
sorry, not to interrupt, but Miguel, I'm kind of curious how these changes to weapon traverse kind of, or rather, how did pathfinding affect some of these changes that are coming to weapon traverse?
Yeah. Um, it will always affect weapon traverse in the sense that we have units such as the Stug and the Marder, which are casemate vehicles. And one of the counterplays of the vehicle as a design choice is that you could flank them. But because the pathfinding wasn't basically doing the smooth curves, players were finding it really difficult to flank them. So uh, basically, if we didn't have the pathfinding changes to make vehicles a lot smoother in their curves and how they will perform now flanks, there could be a problem with these vehicles being too strong because you couldn't flank them due to the poor pathfinding.
Yeah.
But now with all the pathfinding changes, all the vehicle mobility changes, it also made a lot of sense to look at weapon traverse.
Okay, good to know. Next topic for us here, team weapons. I know we're doing some things here to team weapons. Miguel, I think I'll throw this one to you again. What are some of the changes that are coming? Because I know there have been some frustration points with how team
Yeah.
weapons work in the past, and I know we wanted to alleviate a lot of that. So run me through what's the high level notes of how are we changing these?
So at a high level, the problem with team weapons is mostly again the interaction that the player has with them, how easy they and how responsive they are to interact with. Um, so most of the changes were not particularly balance changes per se, but they will impact balance just because if something is more responsive, uh, obviously it will become stronger just by the nature of it. So some of the changes that we were targeting for team weapons was, for example, the teardown time. So now AT guns and team weapons in general should be able to start a teardown a lot more quicker.
Right.
Some other changes were sometimes team weapons were, for instance, packing up when the squad that they are targeting still even at entities inside the arc of fire, which from a player perspective made it seem like the behavior just wasn't quite right. Like it could still
Right.
shoot at entities.
Right. So why are you packing up and leaving when you
Yes,
still have a
exactly.
target? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. There were also some um,
I think off the top of my head, because I'm cheating. I've got the notes in front of me.
yeah,
You
sorry.
don't.
I was just
But
remembering like
yeah,
the
like prioritization, turn in place.
yes. So the turning place is also a big one.
Yeah.
The turning place basically means that you have a grace range before, whereas before, for example, you would tell a team weapon to set up to the left or to the right, and the team weapon would do basically a pivot and a movement to the location and then do the setup. That introduced a lot of delay really to the team weapons. So what we've done is there is a grace range around the team weapon or the HMG that in which the team weapon will not do any movement orders and they'll just do the rephase.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Which from a gameplay perspective, this might seem like a really small point for team weapons, but from a player perspective and even in game, I think it will be really noticeable that it doesn't have the extra delays of pivots and movement orders.
Right. And I think they should be a little bit smarter when they're in their idle state as well, like in terms of like
Yes.
tracking and setting up when an enemy comes into range.
Yes, I'm exactly not sure how noticeable this was before to players, but we've decided to make that experience a lot better. So what could happen before this patch is that team weapons could be in the state of always tracking their enemy if they were not given a manual order to set up.
Right.
So what we've done is we've made that part a lot better, where now the team weapons should be a lot more smart or fast on setting up the team weapon when they're not actually set up and not being given manual orders by the players. But that one is also, I suppose, a big one because it does also impact, for example, if you use attack move, it does impact how responsive the weapon is once it encounters an enemy.
Gotcha. Marco, any thoughts on team weapons?
I think overall players will notice how much smoother they are. I think from my perspective, this is just one of the other like quality of life improvements that had to be done to bring the steam weapons into like now they really feel like you can use them. They feel responsive. We are removing pain points from the players.
Right. Okay. Next up, what do we got here? Marco. Yes. Before we get to unit selection, I think I switched my questions around here, so we'll get to unit selection in a minute. But what about the post-match results? I know some of the stats there needed a bit of a tweak. It was causing a bit of frustration when you finish a match and you're like, "What's going on with this screen?" Can you talk about some of the changes that are coming to that post-match results screen?
Absolutely. Post-match results simply showed too many information, some of which were not really interesting to the player.
Yeah.
We have decided to take a look at that, and we made some refinements to really only surface what's important to the player. So when it comes down to units killed and units lost, instead of counting squads, now we are counting entities. So numbers are going to be accurate from now on. And for damage dealt, we were actually counting every single damage you do to every asset of the game in the game, like including neutral assets. Now we have changed it so that only damage you do to the enemy is counted in those numbers.
Okay.
As for the damage taken instead, we are including the damage you take from the enemy and also the damage you take from your own abilities or your friends. Say you throw an artillery ability and you take damage from it. We've also tried to improve how we calculate resource efficiency, and we have added some tooltips so that players can over the mouse over some of these properties, and they can try to understand. They can understand a bit better how we calculate them. Overall, the idea is that post-match stats should tell you much more interesting and actually accurate
Right.
information.
Yeah.
On top of that, we have added something else that I'm sure we will talk
We'll
more
get to
about
that. Yeah, we'll get
later
to
on.
that. Okay, Miguel, your turn. Unit selection. I know we did make some changes there. Can you maybe quickly cover how that's changed?
Yeah. Unit selection is also one of those things that the player is interacting with the game all the time.
Yeah.
And they might not notice as much if there's like any frustration point there. But as with the theme of with pathfinding here, the solution we're looking for is how can we make the game a lot less frustrating to interact with. Unit selection is a big part of that. What we've done here is adjust how the basically dynamic selection boxes of units interact. Now they should be a lot more forgiving in selection.
Okay.
So they are bigger. And what basically this implies is that players should feel less the need to use the selection bandboxing to select units, and they should now be feeling more comfortable in actually just clicking on the unit and on the entities to select a unit. And as a side effect of this as well is that it should be a lot easier to right-click enemies as well, which I think from more of a practical standpoint, players will feel this a lot, especially when they're using HMGs and targeting enemy units, whereas before they could maybe misclick and start the teardown process on a team weapon.
Right.
So
That was very frustrating.
yes, the change there should be pretty significant.
Yeah.
There's also changes to how we select and unselect retreating units. So now retreating units shouldn't be selectable anymore. And what means from a practical standpoint again is that if you're selecting every unit on the screen, or if you before had a multi-selection group and one of the units had retreated, if it was still selected, it would make that the other squads weren't responding to any commands.
Yes.
Which was really bad.
Yeah.
And we've now made that they basically are unselectable, which means that you won't have instances where you have a retreated unit selected by chance and you cannot give any orders to the rest of your infantry.
Gotcha.
There's also a last one that's more minor, but still pretty significant, which is that now the construction menus or any menus that you have open on units will reset on reclick. Basically, what this means as well, again, from a practical standpoint, is when you have an engineer unit, for example, and sometimes you would be trying to retreat the unit, but you would have the construction menu open.
Yeah. And it's like, no, I don't want to build sandbags.
So now it should be a lot easier to just retreat units or have access to other commands when you forgot that you had the construction menu open before.
Yeah. Okay. Next thing I think is also probably one of the major changes coming in Emerald Bear, and that is off-map abilities. We've done a ton of work here. Marco, I know this is kind of your baby. So again, high level from a design perspective, what are we hoping to do with a lot of the work that's gone into off-map abilities here?
Okay, so at the highest level, we wanted to improve on two of our core pillars, immersion and authenticity. So how did we, and when we took a step back and we looked at how the game was performing when it came down to off-map abilities, we noticed a lot of pain points related to readability of the abilities, consistency, like when the player selects an ability and clicks on an area, does the ability actually performs well where the player has clicked? And the answer many times was actually no. So we wanted to go back to that and actually try to really improve it, while also adding a lot more flavor across different abilities. That allowed us to also create a better infrastructure behind, or like a baseline on which we can build new abilities much quicker, and also allow other players to build new abilities quicker.
Gotcha. So let's maybe again look at some of these before and after shots,
Yes,
and we
and
can
we
kind of
can.
get into some of the details about what's going on here. Okay, so yeah, let's just talk about some of these changes, Marco. Again, that we have a lot of very specific instances here, but what's some of the work that you've been doing here for a lot of these off maps?
I think we're actually still showing the.
Oh, sorry, that's B-roll. My bad. I mean, it's amazing, epic gameplay that of me playing against the AI. Where's my? There it is. All right, let's look at off maps. So what do we do the airburst barrage?
Airburst barrage. So for the airburst, we were looking at especially the consistency. So where the player clicked before, and the barrage itself was taking too long to actually hit the ground, and it was actually pretty unreliable, especially in the first shots. So what we tried to tackle here was making it feel more responsive in terms of how quickly it hits the ground, and also in terms of like consistency. So when you use the ability where the player clicks matters, we still wanted to keep some sort of like an RNG factor. Like we wanted to keep a random element into the abilities, and when we go through each different like archetype of the abilities, we will understand how we achieved this result. But right now, you will notice a lot of nuances like, oh, the ability hits more consistently the center where the player clicked. You also have, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, a different flair for this type of abilities. And overall, it hits quicker while still providing you some time to react to that. Naval bombardment is probably one of the biggest ones that players will notice, especially in the before and after.
Yeah, this clip
For
was
the
nuts.
before, it
This is
took
nuts.
a very long time to hit the field. It was very unreliable in terms of like the consistency at which it would hit targets, but it was also very strong. So we try to add a lot of flavor into this ability. It's probably one of the strongest late game abilities. Players will notice that there are a lot more projectiles. They have been tuned down to be less effective, but they're now firing in a battery of 4. And as you can see, they are extremely effective.
Oh boy. Okay.
They are still going to take some time to hit the ground, so players will have a chance to react. But this is probably one of the strongest abilities we are proposing to our players.
Right. Miguel, any comments on these so far?
That's the new Miguel art.
Well, I've been hit with one of those before. It's not pleasant.
Yeah. I think we showed off the Obiche
Yes.
yesterday.
So for this one, I wanted to call out a couple of things that actually players could even see before. But in the before, you will notice that this ability takes a very long time to hit the field. So enemies that just had too much time to react. They could also suppress infantry and team weapons, and we have changed that so that every unit that doesn't have a retreat capability, that cannot be suppressed, will not. So no more suppression on AT guns, for example. We've also, as you can see here, it's very like shots are very scattered, and they don't really hit where they should. And now in the new version, they are going to be more accurate.
Yeah.
And this is actually a very nice win we're getting in terms of readability. We're bringing back the XP kickers for kills that are coming from the off-map abilities. This is something that even Core 2 was missing, and we're adding it back straight from Core 1.
Nice.
So hopefully, as most of these abilities do not provide any vision, players will still be able to understand if those abilities have been effective at all, and if they got them any kill.
I think a nice thing here that we didn't mention is I'll let these loop again, and maybe we'll
The
come
map
back to it.
looks much better.
Yeah, so in that last clip with the Obiche, it was the old Benghazi when it was still just a workshop map, and it was the new Benghazi
Yes.
that is actually coming to auto match, which looks really, really good now.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's going on here?
Okay, what's going on here? Recon Artillery, only ability in the game that you can basically use everywhere on the map. It also combines the two words of flight and artillery. In the before, you will notice how the plane loiters around the area. You don't know exactly how big the area is. Artillery comes very scattered and doesn't really seem to be like it doesn't really target the entities that are there. So it can become very painful when you use it. You feel like you've wasted your resources, and it takes a long time before they are actually like hitting the enemy and provide you some value. So we've really tried to make this much better. So the airplane now will come in a bigger area. It will move much faster. Players will see the area of effect. They will notice flares where the target is going to be hit, and the artillery is going to be much more accurate. This means that if you are If you're allies and you're hit by these Nebelwerfer or other indirect fire units, you can use this ability to really help you dealing with them. However, and that's the catch, this is still an ability that requires vision, and so it requires the airplane to be alive. If you're able
Right.
to
Okay.
kill the airplane, then the ability will stop.
So that almost incentivizes you to have
AA,
around
yes.
your artillery pieces. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Registered artillery is also a pretty big noticeable. Before we had to do some compromises with how the ability was looking and behaving to bring this sort of like, oh, this is my area, I want to defend it. In the new improved version, players will notice that the ability feels and behaves much more realistic. It acts in a very unique way so that like the projectiles will become more scattered at the start, and as the time passes they will become more consistent in number and accuracy,
Right.
and so you will notice that it's now like more effective.
Yeah.
This gives an element of counterplay to players, so they like if you are the player that receives this, as long as you are hit by the first projectiles you will be able to retreat in time, but if you stay there your squads will die.
Right. So it gives you just enough time to maybe micro
Yeah.
away, but if you're not paying attention, you're going to get punished.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll let these play again as we talk about some of the other things that's going on here. I think you might have mentioned it earlier, but Miguel, modders are now going to be able to use some of the ability templates for off maps. Is that correct?
That is correct. We somewhat did the same work as we did with the flight abilities.
Okay.
So now modders should be able to basically use the same attributes that we use to create these, and if they want, they can create their own. And it should allow them for a good amount of freedom in the way that they want to do any new off-map abilities or even new plane abilities as well.
Okay. So there's a lot going on in these clips. Some of the first things I'm noticing, Marco, we've obviously updated some of the projectile sounds. We've changed flares. We've added ground deformation. I don't know if it was in the clips, but I know we've also changed like the sector effects.
Yes.
What do you think are going to be some of the more comprehensive changes that players are going to notice first here? Maybe you could touch on some of those things that I called out.
Yes. So starting from the idea that we have decided to templatize these abilities into various like archetypes, we have decided to bring back different flare types that are applied to both off-map abilities and their planes, and they will let you understand what type of ability is going to hit you in terms of threat level. So how dangerous that ability is going to be for your units, and so like due to that we tuned aspects like the delay and the projectiles to represent that threat level. So we're going to have 5 different possibilities here. So first one, abilities that are mainly for support purposes, like smoke or beacon. They won't have any flare being used. Airdrop abilities will have the 3 green flares as they are right now, or like supplies, simple supplies. Abilities that are low threat, and when I say low threat, I mean things that can be troublesome for team weapons, but that infantry should be able to dodge, are marked with 3 yellow flares. For abilities that can instead be a threat to infantry and can also potentially damage vehicles, we are using orange flares. And for like very like late game high threat abilities, we are using the red flares. When it comes down, so this should help a lot in terms of readability. So even though you don't know what ability the player is going to use, understanding the threat should help players reacting to that, whether moving troops away if it's a low threat ability, or straight up retreating if it's something that it's like a high threat kind of ability.
I'm seeing a lot of questions about
Yep.
perimeter monitor.
Yes.
Did you do anything there?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So sector abilities and area abilities have received a full pass, and for sector ones, we are actually bringing back the territory highlight on minimap and tactical map. So when you use those abilities, you will notice that if you use those abilities, territories affected will become yellow, And for enemy ones, they will become orange. And when it comes down to how those abilities behave, we have tuned them down a little bit in their behavior. For example, the perimeter artillery for the Indian artillery battle group is now less oppressive. Shots fire like for a longer time, and now we have three different artilleries, so like three entities that can target three different enemies separately, that will acquire targets that they can see in friendly territory, and they will shoot them deal damage, and also
Which should avoid some of the cases where before a single unit would be targeted by
by
5 different
yeah,
flares and be deleted off the map.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I am seeing a lot of questions about very specific
Yes.
off maps. But Marco, from what I'm understanding, you basically touched all of the abilities. Like everything has gotten a
Absolutely.
pass, right?
Yes, so we're going to have, like, as I was talking about before, we're going to have some templates of abilities. We have the standard of map abilities that are usually those that we have spent a lot of time tuning, and we built, like, generally we built two main behaviors. One is that when you use an ability, the first projectiles will be more accurate, because we wanted to enforce the idea that where the player clicked, he should always get some sort of result. So first projectiles will be more accurate, the others will scatter a bit more. And then the other behavior that we can see again for registered artillery or for the zeroing artillery is that projectiles will come more scattered at the start, and then they will increase in number and shrink down to the point where player clicked.
Yeah.
And they will generally be deadlier later on, but initially they will be a little bit easier to deal with. Then we have repurposed the area cover abilities. Now you will see an area highlight exactly like you can with loiters, and you will know where the ability is going to hit. You will see flares whenever an artillery has acquired the target, so you will know exactly which of your squad is going to be targeted. And we have generally set those ability up with, like, different artilleries that can target different unit types, so team weapons, infantry, and vehicles. As for sector abilities, as I was saying before, they are affected by the territories. So, for example, if you use perimeter monitor and you capture the cutoff of the opponent, the perimeter monitor will not work anymore on those territories.
Yeah.
So it's going to behave in a very dynamic way, and it will only target units that are visible to the enemy.
Okay.
So not everyone. So overall, less oppressive, more like allow players more counterplay, and more readable.
Okay. Miguel, any thoughts on off maps, or do you think Marco did a good job here?
Sound and information. We gotta
Yeah,
go.
definitely. Something that Marco didn't mention was that we also changed the sound for off-map abilities. Whereas before, either the artillery would have no sound before it actually hit the ground, or where it would use a heavy barrage sound for what it was a light barrage.
Right.
We've now added different levels of sound effects for the different abilities, meaning that a light barrage should have a more clear sounding distinction, comparing to a heavy artillery type thing. So that will help players a lot. Allied to that, and in the same way that we did with flight, we've also made changes to ground deformation. And it was probably pretty noticeable in the videos that now artilleries are creating a lot more craters and deformation on the ground, which is one of the big pillars in the Company of Heroes franchise, and we are always looking for ways to bring that back.
Yeah.
So off maps are being given the same treatment as we did with flight in regards to ground deformation.
So let's maybe switch gears and talk.
Just before
Sorry,
we go,
yeah, go ahead. Go
also
ahead.
just a small one as well. Mark was mentioning the flares for the off-map abilities, the threat levels. We've also extended the flares to the flight abilities.
Oh, okay. Right. So they should be consistent for all
Yes.
abilities.
Yes.
Okay. So let's maybe shift gears to balance. I know There are a lot of tweaks and adjustments to balance that are coming in Emerald Bear. Unfortunately, we don't have Jason here to talk about those. But are there any sort of specific changes that you think players will be excited to see? I the one that I'm really happy to see is I know projectiles won't set off mines anymore, which is
Yes.
really frustrating. Marco, let's maybe start with you. What are some
Yes.
some big balance things coming that you're sort of excited for?
Yes. So quoting Jason here, this is going to be a gentle pass. So
Gentle.
you won't
Okay.
notice like super huge changes. However, at a high level, we looked at the problems we had seen in the meta in the last patch, and we are specifically tackling those problems, which are, for example, the Easy 8 becoming that was really dominant when for the US faction, and for on the other side, Stooks were just overperforming, especially in their Vet 1 abilities.
Yep.
Ability, we are toning those down. And we also noticed that there was it was too easy for Americans when playing the airborne battle group to call in those airdrop HMGs, and especially they were just it was just too easy to call multiple of those. So we have more than doubled the cooldown for that ability from 30 seconds to 75. I'm giving out numbers because I know how much players would care about that. But we're also making them slightly cheaper because we know that like changing so heavily the cooldown will have a big impact on that. When it comes down to factions changes, specifically for the US and the UK and the British versus, we have identified that they are struggling a little bit in team games, and we have tried to help them a little bit there. Especially like with some minor to medium buffs to units, but especially with like making the other battle groups, especially the Spec Ops and the Airborne Battle Group, a little stronger in their elite troops. So now players will notice that SSF commandos will be more durable on the battlefield, while airborne troops abilities will, like the grenade, will be stronger, and that should help the faction feel a little bit more competitive when like not using the specific like rifleman into easy eights. As for the easy eights, again, we really toned them down. Well, when we actually did the pass on the 76 millimeter Sherman, where we toned it down, we didn't do it on the easy 8. We're doing it now. So now the easy 8s should feel just like a slightly improved version of the Sherman 76 millimeter.
Right. Okay.
When it comes down to the Germans instead, we have slightly toned down the tier 3. So because we have made the Stug Vet 1 ability a little bit worse. And we have made, as the Stug now can use the gun traverse, we have made it a little bit easier for players to flank.
Okay.
On the other side, we have made the tier 2 building a little bit more accessible by not touching units that were already like that already had been quite strong in the past, like the Jaegers. We have been touching more the scout car, or the flak gun, and the Wirbelwind by making them a little bit cheaper for players to get.
Okay. Miguel, what about you? Anything coming balance wise that they're really excited about?
Uh, Marco already mentioned the minor to medium buffs to factions, but for example, the British will receive a fair amount of those. We also have changes to how the British Training Center works, which will now be available from the start. And we also have changes specifically to the deck, where they should be now less reliant on combined arms. So we've shifted the power from the combined arms passive more onto the unit themselves, the Panzer Grenadiers.
Okay.
And the passive should now be a little bit weaker, but still pretty useful to have. In addition to that, we added more vehicles that can actually give that bonus as well. And the bigger one, or the biggest change to deck as well, is how Armored Reserves works. So what we did is we made the upgrade more accessible so that players can use more of the Panzer IV call-in or the Stug call-in. But the Tiger will now have its cost increased, so it's still harder to obtain within the comparatively to the other call-ins. But overall, it's still a net positive gain for the Tiger because we've reduced the upgrade cost. So even with that added cost to the Tiger itself, it will still be easier to obtain than
Yeah.
before.
Okay.
So
So we might see
it's
some
more
more
about
tigers.
Shifting.
shifting,
Yeah.
yes, where the prices are.
Okay. Some questions in the chat that I want to answer. Specifically, we were talking much earlier about some of the changes that are coming to team weapons, which makes them a little bit more effective and a little bit more reliable. Are we going to be addressing their balance to compensate for that? For that added responsiveness?
We've added some very light balance changes, for example, for HMGs. But what we're also trying to see right now is how the pathfinding changes will somewhat play with team weapons. Because now, for example, vehicles should be a lot more smoother to use. So we also want to see how team weapons such as AT guns react to that, because now they should be more flankable because of that as well. So it's something that it's an iterative approach on this, but yes, there are like some light changes to
Okay.
how some team weapons
So
behave.
we're nerfing the MG42.
I'll mention, yeah, for example, I know players want to go very much into details.
Yeah.
So like a couple of examples, we have slightly actually buffed the Vickers at long range, and for the HMG42 instead, we have made like its capacity to suppress and ping units slightly worse. So instead of one burst, it's going to take two bursts.
Okay, so
And I know that players really want to dig into
yeah,
those details.
I've seen like 100 questions in the chat already about that. What about the German MP40s? They're a little strong.
We have also, yes, okay. So about the German MP40s, we're also nerfing them
Okay.
so that they won't be as dominant as they are. They still provide a shock value, but not to the degree where they are just that dominant. So
Okay.
when for the MP40s, the long and mid like will be worse. So players should be able to like play better around those units, like
Okay.
when fighting around those units.
Okay. We won't get too much in the weeds about like the actual line changes coming in the patch notes. Like I said, there's gonna be a lot. This is a what did Jason call it?
Gentle
a
pass.
gentle pass for balance. But there are a lot of notes, a lot of changes, especially when you consider the pathfinding changes, the changes to vehicle speeds and rotation. So we're really hoping that Emerald Bear just feels better to play. So let's maybe get back to what do I want to talk about next? I'm like so all
Did
over
we
the place.
mention weekly challenges?
No,
'Cause-
we're a couple points.
Okay.
First up, I wanted to call out, or I think Marco, you wanted to call out
Yes,
follow camera
yes.
and building selection.
Yes.
So what's going on there?
I know, like if you guys have played Co1 or Co2 and used hotkeys, you are going to to really appreciate that. So now we have added the key bindings and the feature for you to like select and follow or center camera on units when you double click on portraits on unit portraits, and when you double tap on the base on production buildings, the camera will be centered on those.
Okay.
And that's also customizable, right?
And that's also customizable. Yes, you will be able to change it. So let's say that instead of using the function keys to select the different buildings, you use something else. You will be able to also change the combination of buttons to center camera on those.
Yeah, I know those a big quality of life thing.
Yes.
They wanted to get in.
We actually have in the control settings, the last option available allow players to decide whether they want camera to be centered or to follow units when you double click on the unit portraits.
Okay, amazing. Miguel, one balance thing that we missed that I wanted to ask you about was changes coming to repair speeds. So I know that repair abilities for specific units might be changed now when certain things are going on in the game. Can you maybe explain that a little bit?
So a lot of the work with repair has been with standardizing how repairs work and their repair rates, as well as making sure that abilities that do improved repairs are nicely adding up to that repair value, instead of maybe overwriting what was there before, or just generally being difficult to grok where how much repair you're gaining. And also we added repairs to the hazard package removal upgrade. So overall, just it should be a lot more consistent on the repair rates of everything.
And
Okay.
also easier for us to further tune it as we have
Yes.
again laid a better foundation for us to work on it in the future.
Okay. So now, Miguel, let's get into daily and weekly challenges. I know in the past, the challenge descriptions didn't always align with, standard play or what was typical in a normal match. So how have we adjusted challenges in Emerald Bear?
So challenges, the problem that we faced is that they are shaping too much how the players play the game to just complete these challenges. So the work we've done is we've made them easier to actually achieve, and that should lead to less, again, I'm using the word a lot here, but frustrating moments because someone is doing something just to complete a challenge.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So merit, we know that you gain with those challenges and that'll be easier to gain because the challenges themselves are, also toned down.
Okay, no, that's great to hear. And I think one of the last big features that we wanted to cover here, yeah, it's something that I know we've wanted to get into the game for a while, so I'm really excited that we can finally show it off. I am going to show some early images here on the screen of our new player profile. Marco, can you talk a bit about what's on offer with this feature?
Yes.
We will have a detailed blog post closer to Emerald Bear's release. That's going to talk more about player profiles, so stay tuned for that. But let's chat about what's going on here, Marco.
Yes, so player profile is one of our like first social features that we have been able to add into the game. It will provide a pretty comprehensive breakdown of all the matches you have played in every game mode with every faction. Sorry, when I say game mode, I mean actually PvP, a game, automatic games, co-op versus AI. And we're also bringing, and that was we can see it here in the post-match stats, we're bringing your total elo and the elo gain or lost based on if you won or lost the game. So here you will notice that we have added new new rank icons, these shiny medals, uh, and we have actually decided to update the previous ones that we were using with these new ones. Players will also notice that we have done a pass on the faction icons, which
Yeah,
are
they look a lot better. Yeah,
a much more improved version of them.
yeah,
So what we want there is to actually lay the foundation for us to allow players to really check how they are performing with the game, check the playing time, the amount of games they play, the win rate, their favorite faction, and check all those medals. In the blog post that will come out I guess very soon, they will get a better idea of how rank levels work and how you can achieve them. We are actually using the same foundation of the previous 20 rank levels that we had. So we are not changing the underlying system. And I'm sure that the blog post will cover like all the details, but we are not introducing also ranked seasons. This is mostly player profile and
yeah.
updating the ranks to better fit with that.
Yeah, we'll have more specifics about how
Yep.
all of this is going to work. I did see some questions about are we going to reset elo? For the time being, no,
Yes. No.
because players have worked hard, in matchmaking to gain their ranks. So we're not going to be resetting that right now. Again, we'll have more details about why in our blog post that's going to be coming up. I saw someone talking about, okay, is unranked now ranked? So what we're actually calling that mode now, our standard auto match PvP mode, is going to be quick match.
Yes.
And that is going to be ranked. So, Marco, do you want to maybe explain that and why we made that decision?
Yes. So we basically acknowledge that we wanted to we didn't want to do a reset of the leaderboards and really like touch that part too heavily until we could do something that really changed how the underlying system worked. And as we could not do that because we wanted to put player profiles in players' hands as soon as possible, we decided not to reset stats and to actually update the unranked games into quick match. That's how we're going to call it from now on. But that's not only that. We've also added a lot of like social features related to that. So as you can see in this picture, we've added buttons to check other players' profiles, as well as add them as friends, block them, or like every other social interaction. For example, in this case, you would be checking the emerald. This is how the screen would look when checking the emerald profile. And you can notice on the top right, there is a button that allows you to add him as friend, for example.
Yeah.
So this allows you to really like go into your friend list or your chat and check other people profiles and
Yeah,
understand how good they are.
and that's going to be available basically anywhere you see another player's name. So that's going to be like post match,
Yes.
lobbies, etc. Miguel, any comments on the work that's gone into this feature and some of the systems behind it?
I mean, I'm a player that really enjoys these types of features, so for me this is great to see, and also I love how you can see the elo difference after the game.
Right.
I also just think that it was a very needed feature to just be able to show your achievements.
Yes.
And shout out to Grandma Conti, Joe Conti's Gam Gam at home, working hard on her rank. So yeah, very, very excited for us to roll that out. If you just missed it there's also a link to the web
Yes.
leaderboards right in the player profile, so you can jump right into the leaderboards and check that out. See how you match up against everyone else. Any final thoughts on that, Marco? I think I cut you off there.
Yeah, no, no problem. That also means, of course, that as we are linking them to web leaderboards, that we are going to update all the rank medals on the web leaderboards. So instead of using the 20 rank level icons that players have seen already in Co 1 and Co 2, we are moving to a more standardized system
Yeah.
that will be common to each faction. So players will be able to relate between factions. So we're now featuring different sets of like ranks. Last one, of course, the biggest one being Challenger. And we have decided to split those into leagues and tiers. So, for example, you will have gold 1, 2, 3, and all of those like silver, bronze,
Yeah.
brass, and Challenger. So there are like I think players will overall like the direction we're going
Yeah,
with this.
and like I said, we're going to release a full blog post that kind of covers in a little bit more detail. Miguel, is this the announcement of you coming back to ranked mode or to quick match rather? Are you coming out of retirement or you got too much work to do?
I think I have too much work to do, but maybe I'll try and get my rank 1 back as Americans.
Okay, all right, you heard here, folks. Catch DevM in a USFQ near you. So last time we were chatting with Will, really in depth about maps. We're showing Monte Carlo on the screen again here. I'm curious for both of you, which of the new ones coming are you excited for players to be to have some games on? Miguel, are you more looking forward to Benghazi in auto match or to Monte Carlo?
I think Benghazi for me is still the one I'm looking forward to the most. It's just the lighting and the atmosphere of it. I love it. I also think the map itself lends itself to the kind of playstyle I like, which is the urban kind of playstyle and flanking
Right.
and all
Yeah.
that. Obviously, Monte Carlo for me still looks great, especially the nighttime. But Benghazi is still my preference.
Yeah. What about you, Marco? I feel like you just love all the maps because they're all Italian. But which of these two are you excited for?
I honestly, I was about to say Benghazi as well, but I think that both of them are just extremely good looking. They're really like a step forward in terms of how our presentation can look like. I'm very very I really love the south side of Monte Cavo because like I think they are now telling you a very nice story about Benghazi and Monte Cavo
Yeah.
with how the maps are structured, and Will did a great job trying like communicating that to our community. So I'm really looking forward to playing them. And also, I think that both the maps offer a very different playstyle based on where you play. So you have the urban type of map in Benghazi, but the north is a bit more open. Or in this map, Monte Cavo, the two sides are a bit more open, but then you have all the buildings in the center. So I'm pretty sure that players will really enjoy those.
Okay, that's great to hear. I like both those maps, so I'm going to cheat and not give a good answer. So folks, I think that's going to do it for this live stream today. So for those that missed it, this Emerald Bear update is going to be dropping on July 25th. You'll be able to catch the patch notes that day as well. Like I said, they're very long. We've got a lot of work to get those ready. We're going to be doing our next live stream a couple days after on July 27th. I think that's going to be more of a fun play session. So maybe we'll try and get some players or some of the devs to just jump on and play some matches on the new maps. Again, to stay up to date on everything Company of Heroes 3, you're going to want to follow us Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube at Company of Heroes. Join our Discord, discord.gg/Company of Heroes. And follow us right here, twitch.tv/Relic Entertainment, or head to the forums, community.companyofheroes.com for everything else. Also, folks, don't forget you can head over to those forums and sign up for our monthly raffle where you can win a free Company of Heroes bomber jacket. Miguel, do you want to demonstrate what that jacket looks like for folks? You don't have to put it on, but can you hold it up for everyone? So again, you can go to the
that's the
forums,
concept.
sign up for an account, and you
It
can
does.
be entered to win a free bomber jacket once every month. We're giving one of these things away. Also, last but not least, we have extended our support of Wounded Warriors Canada. We're really excited about this partnership with Wounded Warriors Canada because they are such a fantastic organization and charity. For every charity donation, you can grab some free Company of Heroes apparel and some amazing prizes that we've got listed here. You can find the donation link in the chat. So thank you for that, mods. Just on a personal note, in my service in the Canadian Army, I had a lot of friends that were either injured or wounded during training or during deployment. And organizations like Wounded Warrior Canada really helped them out, especially after they left the service, really supported their families. So really phenomenal charity. So please be sure to check that out. I think that's it. So let's just kind of wrap up here. Final thoughts, Miguel. What are you kind of most looking forward to with Emerald Bear? Are you just like you just excited to start watching Twitch matches and that, or are you, like you said, just going to start climbing the ladder and crushing noobs as as you get your rank back?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see how players react to the patch and how they interact with the game now, because I think we made a lot of changes that should make the game a lot more responsive and easier to play overall, more enjoyable. I'm looking forward to see how people react to the off-map changes and the new flares that we have coming in. So yeah, I can't say a particular point. I think it's so many good changes coming in at the same time that even weapon traverse, that I'm looking forward to see the reaction of everyone.
And Marco, when I say Miguel's gonna be crushing noobs, I'm basically talking about you and me. Um, but yeah, are you equally excited for players to jump into Emerald Bear?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I really cannot wait for them to put their hands on the patch. It was a lot of work from a lot of people, and really like a very big team effort from us. And the patch is really big, guys. Like it's full of notes, and you will spend hours probably going through
Even
all of them,
even all the bug fixes, it's
Yeah.
even all the bug
sometimes
fixes.
it's really hard to acknowledge how much those change the perception of the game. But sometimes you might find one there that really frustrates you, and if that's fixed in the patch. And I think we have a lot of bug fixes. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, huge shout out to the team that you don't necessarily get to see on camera. There's a lot of folks
Yeah.
behind the
yeah.
scenes that are doing a ton of work. So I think that's it. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you, everyone, for watching. July 25th is coming up soon, folks, and we can't wait for you to get your hands on the Emerald Bear update. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will catch you next time. Take care.